They say that admitting an addiction is the beginning of solving the problem of addiction. Okay, here goes. My name is Rich, and I have 4 iPads. If you're familiar with this channel, you know I make a lot of easy-to-follow videos on how to get the most out of your iPad, but I get questions from time to time about, what apps I use and how I organize my home screen, and do I use an Apple Pencil and such. In this video, I'm going to take you behind the scenes and show you how I use my iPad on a daily basis, or I guess I should say iPads. There are an endless number of things you can do with an iPad, but I've never been one to download 1,000 apps that I end up never using and that just take up space. Like my videos, I keep my iPads pretty simple. Now, there's no right way to use an iPad, so what I'm showing you today may not fit into your workflow, but it might give you some ideas on how to better use your iPad. At least that's my goal with this video. So today I'm just going to show you 3 things: what apps I use and how I organize them, what iPad accessories I use, and how I connect my iPad Air to an external monitor. All right, let's get started. Yes, I have 4 iPads. I know that's a little bit crazy, but hear me out. This first iPad I'm using here is actually a 2018 iPad Pro, and I just hang on to my iPads a long time, and this is one that I use almost every day. I read at night and I use this iPad, and I've got it set up in a fairly simple fashion. I've put my productivity apps along the top, my mail, calendar, reminders, that kind of thing along the top. And then I have some communication things next with FaceTime and messages. All my messages are in there. And I also keep track of my notes, and I've made a number of videos on notes. I use notes almost like my second brain. I store a whole bunch of different stuff in the folders that I have in my notes setup. It syncs between all of the iPads. It syncs with my Mac computer, so I just love that. I also have the Files app here, and I have access, since I store almost everything I have on iCloud. I don't store things locally. It's available on every iPad I have, and again on my computer as well, so it's easy to just keep track of everything that way, and I have access to it on any iPad that I'm using. I also have, Safari and Twitter and a few other apps, and that's the main apps that I use each day. Now, over in my app library, I have a whole bunch of other apps, but I just don't use them all that often. I don't delete them if I know that I'm going to use them from time to time, so I just leave them there. But the main apps are over here. And then down in the dock, I have a few other things that I use sort of regularly as well. I use the Photos app, of course, like everybody, and I read books, and so I have that in there. And I use a couple of other apps that are specific to me. But I have essentially everything on my home screen that I need, that I can get to. I also sort of like fancy widgets. This is a widget that I made with an application called Widgie, and doesn't do anything, but it just shows the date, the time, and the outside temperature. And I kind of like that, and it looks sort of cool up there. I use the YouTube widget as well, and then I use the weather widget here because, again, I have to know the weather everywhere all the time. I don't know why, but that's just the way I am. But this setup right here is exactly how I use this iPad on a day-to-day basis, and this is the 12.9-inch iPad Pro from 2018. Now, I also have the new M1 iPad Air, and this is how I have it set up. It's a little bit different because I use this one a little bit differently. I have a few more different apps down in the dock. Again, I have a widget over here that tells the date and a few other pieces of information, battery level and temperature. And I only keep a few apps up on this screen. This screen is smaller than the 12.9-inch, so I only keep my main apps that are up there. I do keep in the left side, I do keep my split screen shortcuts over there, and I made a video on how to do split screen shortcuts, so if I want to call up calendar and reminders, I can do that, or calendar and notes come up. And it's just a handy way to pull up two apps very quickly at the same time. But other than that, that's a pretty simple setup on this M1 iPad Air. And I use this iPad to connect to my external monitor, which I'll show you in just a few minutes. I also have the 10th generation base iPad. And this is an iPad that I make videos on and use this a lot, along with the 9th gen, which I'll show you in a second. And on this one, I just typically keep a clear home screen. I don't want a lot of things up here when I'm trying to show a video on how to do something. I just want it to be as simple and easy to follow as possible. I bought this iPad because it was a new shape and style, and they're going to be stopping production on the previous iPad, which was the 9th gen iPad. But I also have that iPad, and you've probably seen this iPad in more of my videos than any other iPad I have. This is just the base iPad. It's the same style that's been out for years. I have used it literally for years. And you know, the software on all of these iPads are the same. There's nothing unique about it, with the exception of the M1 iPad. That can connect to an external monitor in full screen support. But other than that, they're all essentially the same. So whether you spend the least amount of money on this iPad or whether you spend the most amount of money on an iPad Pro, you're still pretty much getting the same experience. So right now, I've got my 2018 iPad Pro, my 10th gen iPad that I bought, my M1 iPad that I use on my external monitor, and then this iPad that I use for video training. I know it's a lot. I probably won't keep all of these iPads because that's a little bit crazy, but it just so happens to have worked out that way. My accessories are pretty straightforward. I use a tablet stand with a keyboard and mouse all the time. If you've not tried this, I urge you to give it a go. Now, I'm not a typist, but I like the feel of a physical keyboard, and it just feels like I'm using a computer when I use this setup. The stand I'm using is the Banks Universal Stand. I have other stands designed for specific iPads, but I like this stand, not only for its flexibility, but I can use it with, any iPad I have. The keyboard and mouse are made by Apple. Like most Apple products, they're a little pricey, but I just love the feel of how they work. But here's the thing. I can set my iPad into this stand and use it like I would a desktop computer, and then I can just pop it out of the stand and take it with me wherever I go. That's what I really love about an iPad. I also use an external drive from time to time. I don't really like paying Apple an exorbitant fee for extra iPad storage, so I just keep large files on an external drive. When you show up at the Apple store and, you can buy different size storages, but it gets really expensive on the iPad, so I usually just buy the base model. Anyway, I can access everything from within the Files app. So again, it just feels more like a computer experience than a tablet experience. And you may never have a need for something like this, but it's good to know it's available if you need it. I also use the Apple Pencil, but not as much as you'd think. I made a video on how to use the Apple Pencil, and it was well received, but honestly, I just don't use it that much in real life. I do plan on setting up a journal in Apple Notes and using the pencil to make entries, kind of like the old-fashioned diary thing. So I guess we'll see how that works out. If you go on Amazon, you can find a whole bunch of accessories for the iPad. And man, I've tested a lot of them, but I tend to just keep what works and get rid of everything else. And for me, a good stand, keyboard, mouse, and pencil, as well as an external hard drive, that's all I need. And all of these things can slip into my travel bag too, and they just follow me wherever I go. But mostly I just keep them propped up here at the house and use them just like I've described. Now, I've never really used my iPad with an external monitor, though I've always loved that idea. But after Apple added external full screen display support, I purchased the Apple Studio display. It was expensive, but something I plan on using for years to come. And at some point, I plan on getting a new computer too to pair with the display, but in the meantime, I connect my M1 iPad Air to this gorgeous screen. Now, you can connect any iPad to an external monitor, but only the M1 iPads offer a second full screen display experience. If you plug in just a regular iPad to an external monitor, you just get a mirrored screen setup. And that's not bad, but I prefer the full screen experience with the M1 iPad. I will say in this setup, it most feels like a desktop computer. I'm using a keyboard and mouse and I can whip around pretty quickly. Since I just bought this display, I've not used this arrangement a whole lot, but man, I certainly plan to. And for me, this is probably going to be the best way to use an iPad in a stationary setup. Well, that's it for this short behind-the-scenes video. I hope it inspires you to think about different ways you can set up and use your iPad. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.